What's good, YouTubers and YouTubettes? This is JBsports, back again with another one. One of the biggest welterweight matchups in recent memory. The biggest fight since Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao. We have two champions in the welterweight division, two undefeated fighters, two guys that have never tasted defeat, two guys that have never been knocked down or knocked out. I have them number one and number two on my pound for pound list. You have one guy in Terrence Crawford who is a multi-division world champion, undisputed in the junior welterweight division, and be looking to make history and become undisputed in two different weight classes. Taking on the big fish, Errol Spence Jr., unified welterweight champion. Has done all the heavy lifting in the welterweight division when he first defeated Kell Brook to become the IBF welterweight champion, and then he defeated Sean Showtime Porter to become the WBC champion, and then he capped it off by defeating Yordenis Ugas to become the WBA champion. And that's a Ugas that sent the Filipino icon and WBA champion at the time, Manny Pacquiao, into retirement with a dominant performance. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Much anticipated matchup. This fight has been pegged as a 50-50 fight. Sometimes they say a fight is a 50-50 fight. In reality, it's probably a 70-30 fight or a 60-40 fight. But when they say this fight is a 50-50 fight, it holds true. And this fight is going to boil down to punch resistance by Errol Spence Jr. Because the activity rate, the punch output per round, I don't see Terrence Crawford being able with his style to keep up. So Terrence Crawford being a guy that, in my opinion, is the best in boxing when it comes to punching with his opponent, catching his opponent in between punches and getting them with a shot that puts them in a bad state of mind, hurts them. And he's one of the best finishers in boxing. He's able to go in for the kill and get the win. In some of those cases, he's been down on the scorecards. In the Sean Porter fight, he was down in that fight, but he was able to get the stoppage late. When he took on Kell Brook, I thought he was losing that fight, as Kell Brook was controlling him with the jab in the 1-2. But he was able to line him up and catch him with a punch he didn't see. Beautiful shot. It was called the anchor punch 2.0. The same punch that Muhammad Ali caught Sonny Liston in the rematch. That was the same punch that Bud caught Kell Brook. Beautiful punch. This guy has one of the highest boxing cues in boxing history. Not only today, but in boxing history. This guy is a very intellectual boxer / puncher. He's got a consecutive knockout streak, and he's going to be looking to continue that versus Errol Spence Jr. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But in the midst of him punching with Errol Spence Jr., because he will be trying to punch with Errol Spence Jr., he will be trying to catch Errol Spence Jr. in between shots, and Errol Spence Jr. will oblige, because Errol Spence Jr. is a guy that throws a lot of punches. He is very offensive minded. So once he lands that punch on Errol Spence Jr., if the punch hurts Errol Spence Jr. and he's able to go in for the kill like he did with Sean Porter and Kell Brook and several fighters of his illustrious career that he's defeated, then we're going to be looking at Terrence Crawford, who said before this fight that he's looking to put the cherry on the top of the cake. He'll be putting the cherry on the top of the cake, and he'll be once again furthering his legacy as becoming two-time undisputed champion in the sport of boxing. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, Errol Spence Jr. is going to be looking to set up the jab. He's going to be doing a good job of trying to make Terrence Crawford have to reset. If Terrence Crawford cannot take away the jab, it's going to be a long night for Terrence Bud Crawford, as Errol Spence Jr., in my opinion, has, if not the best jab in boxing, one of the best jabs in boxing. It's a thudding jab too. He does a good job of doubling up on the jab. He's very consistent with the jab, and he's very defensively responsible behind the jab. So if you try to counter him, you know, with the left hand, as he's trying to expose you with the left jab, he does a good job of keeping the right hand up in around his face and chin. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Very, very interesting matchup. Terrence Bud Crawford must stay off the ropes. If he's on the ropes, he's in a bad situation. As Terrence Crawford is a guy that has great legs. He's able to move. He's able to stay out of harm's way. But if you look at his last fight versus David Adversary, he was in the pocket in that fight. He did not do a lot of movement. That was a prelude. Was that a prelude to what he's going to do when he fights Errol Spence Jr.? He's going to be looking to stay in the pocket and catch Errol Spence Jr. with a shot that he don't see in between the punches that has been thrown by Errol Spence Jr. That remains to be seen. Or will he get on his bicycle and try to move around like he did versus Victor Postal? That was a younger version of Terrence Crawford. In his last several fights, he seems to be more stationary, more in the pocket. Now, he moved a little bit with Porter earlier in that fight, but that was because the aggression of Sean Porter made him have to kind of move around and try to stay out of harm's way. And when Sean Porter was initiating offense, Terrence Crawford went into the high guard. If he does that against Errol Spence Jr., Errol Spence Jr. will be looking to punish him to the body. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. It boils down to punch resistance by Errol Spence Jr. As Errol Spence Jr. is bringing the pressure, throwing punches, putting that jab out there, looking to score off the jab, looking to set up the right hand, looking to go to the body. In the midst of him doing that, Terrence Crawford is going to be looking to catch him with some shots in between punches, punch with him. And if he's able to be successful in doing that, and those punches do not hurt Errol Spence Jr., then Terrence Crawford will lose this fight, either by unanimous decision or maybe by late stoppage, as he is going to be taking a lot of punishment, man, because Errol Spence Jr. is trying to touch you, no matter if it's on the elbow, shoulder, hip. He's just trying to touch you. With him being the naturally bigger guy, he's probably going to have a big weight advantage on fight night. It's going to be up to Terrence Crawford to hit him with something to decrease that punch output and that punch volume. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. I like Errol Spence Jr. to win this fight by decision. I think the first 4 rounds he will get ahead of Terrence Crawford. Now, Terrence Crawford definitely needs to be more assertive. Terrence Crawford is a guy that likes to download information in the first 3 to 4 rounds, make the adjustment, find out what his opponent bringing to the table, look to exploit the weaknesses that he sees in the first couple of rounds, and then set up to the power shot and ultimately stops his opponent. But in the midst of him doing that against Errol Spence Jr., who has a high punch output, he can find himself down on the scorecards. And then when he does set that money punch up, that power shot up against Errol Spence Jr., if Errol Spence Jr. don't go nowhere, then I don't see a scenario of Terrence Bud Crawford winning the fight in that scenario. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, when you look at the footwork, Terrence Crawford has faster feet, but Terrence Crawford's feet are fundamentally sound. Terrence Crawford is the more athletic fighter. Terrence Crawford is a guy that can get away with doing things not by the book. Errol Spence Jr., everything that he does is by the book. Very fundamentally sound. He's the Tim Duncan of boxing, where I would say Terrence Crawford is more of the Kevin Garnett of boxing. But will it be the Kevin Garnett in Minnesota, or will it be the Kevin Garnett in Boston that won that chip when they beat the Kobe Bryant-led Lakers 4-2? So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But Tim Duncan has got 5 rings. And Errol Spence Jr. said that in one of those all-access episodes promoting this fight, saying that we're the San Antonio Spurs. Derek James is Greg Popovich. I'm Tim Duncan. Anthony Joshua is David Robinson. He said Ryan Garcia is Manu Ginobili. He said Jamel Charlo is Kawhi Leonard. and he said that Frank Martin is Tony Parker. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, Terrence Crawford said he ain't Kevin Garnett, he Kobe Bryant. And if that's indeed the case, we in for a hell of a fight. Because like Tim Duncan that has 5 rings, Kobe Bryant has 5 rings. And both of those guys are top 10 all-time NBA players. So we will see what happens. And we will see what transpires. But I like Errol Spence Jr. to get that early lead in the first 4 rounds. And after that, I think it'll be a back and forward affair, a tug of war. Both fighters will have their moments. Maybe they split the last 8 rounds. And I can easily see Errol Spence Jr. winning the 8 rounds to 4, or maybe 7 rounds to 5, and wins the decision. Another thing that Terrence Crawford is going to have to take into account is Errol Spence Jr. is the A side. Errol Spence Jr. is the bigger attraction. The PBC, which promotes Errol Spence Jr., is looking to put on a mega fight in 2024, at the end of 2024, and that is Canelo Alvarez versus Errol Spence Jr. at Cowboy Stadium. That fight will probably do 100,000 fans in attendance. It would do great pay-per-view numbers. And in all actuality, that fight is bigger than Crawford versus Spence, because you're bringing in 2 fan bases, the Mexican fan base and the African-American fan base. And in this case, with Crawford versus Spence, both of those guys are pulling from the same fan base. But this fight is so big, man. You got all boxing fans from all ethnicities excited. And I think it would do good numbers. Will it do as good as Tank versus Ryan Garcia, which was another example of an African-American fighter fighting a Mexican-American fighter? So they was pulling from 2 fan bases. That's why the fight did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. Will Spence versus Crawford exceed that number? I doubt it, but we will see what happens. And we will see what transpires as far as that goes. It'll be interesting to see the stars that will be in attendance for this fight. It's going to be a lot of NFL players at this fight. It's going to be a lot of NBA players at this fight. Major League Baseball players, not so much, because they're in season playing right now, so I don't see that happening. But it's going to be a lot of entertainers there, a lot of actors and actresses there, a lot of singers there. So it's going to be a fight that's going to be very star-studded, attended. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But both of these guys are creme de la creme, top-tier fighters. Both guys bring different attributes to the table. But I think this fight boils down to can Errol Spence Jr., who has never been knocked down before, he's been hurt before, but he's never been knocked down before, can he take the power of Terrence Crawford? Terrence Crawford does a great job of producing that power, setting that power up, and he will set that power up on Errol Spence Jr. What will be the result once he sets that power up on Errol Spence Jr.? Will Errol Spence Jr. be hurt and Terrence Crawford go in for the kill, or will Errol Spence Jr. eat that and keep pressing forward? That's what this fight gonna boil down to. If he eats it and keeps pressing forward, Errol Spence Jr. gonna win the fight. If Terrence Crawford lines him up with that power shot, because he got power in the right hand or the left hand. If he lines him up for the power shot and he hurts Terrence Crawford, he hurts Errol Spence Jr., well, Terrence Crawford is going to go in for the kill, as he's one of the best finishers, if not the best finisher in boxing. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Another pound-for-pound fighter, Tank Davis, made an interesting observation of this fight. He said this fight's going to boil down to Terrence Crawford, who he believes has a glass shield, going against Errol Spence Jr., who he says has a metal shield. So he basically saying that both guys going to get touched, but the problem is Terrence Crawford is chinny and Errol Spence Jr. is not chinny. I don't subscribe to that line of thinking fully. I think both guys have great chins. I've never seen Crawford knocked down or knocked out, and I've never seen Errol Spence Jr. knocked down or knocked out. But I have seen Terrence Crawford hurt more than I've seen Errol Spence Jr. hurt. Now, Terrence Crawford has had, 11 more fights? But I'm talking about when you're fighting the top line guys. I've seen Terrence Crawford hurt more than I've seen Errol Spence Jr. hurt. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Follow me on Facebook, Gerard Briscoe. And before you follow me on Facebook, Make your prediction in the comment section. Who you like in this particular matchup? You like Terrence Crawford, or you like Errol Spence Jr., aka Big Fish? Let me know who you like in this particular matchup in the comment section, and follow me on Facebook, Gerard Briscoe. Like, share, and subscribe to JB Sports, the man, the myth, the legend, and I holla.